Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Transmedia Art Seminar. My name is Magda Romanska, and I co-host the seminar with my colleague Ramona Mos. We are thrilled here today to welcome Nina Zuckerberg. The seminars have been sponsored by MetaLab and Mahindra Humanities Center, and this is our first seminar of the season of the academic year. And we are thrilled to welcome Nina to talk about AI as performer. I'm going to pass on the baton to my colleague Ramona, who will talk a little bit about Nina and Nina's work. And after that, we will proceed to Nina's lecture.
Thank you, Magda, and welcome everyone, and welcome in particular Nina Tecklenburg. And we're super excited to have you here and to have you sort of kick us off into the third season of a Transmedia Art Seminar. And just for everyone to give you a short introduction, which will be a particular pleasure for me because Nina and I have been sort of, I think I can say, long-time collaborators at this point on various projects. So it's kind of like, it feels particularly wonderful to be able to include you in this lineup now. So, and Nina is what I would say, a true artist scholar in that she is really working very prolifically in both areas, both as a theatre studies scholar and a professor of theatre and performance at the moment at Bard College Berlin, but also as a very active artist and co-artistic director of the performance group in Terabang that is based in Berlin. And she's also collaborated with a variety of very well-known and award-winning performance artists and groups. Gob Squad is among them, Shishi Pop, Lone Twin Theatre, and Rabbi Murray. She was also a guest professor at Ernst Busch Academy of Dramatic Arts in Berlin. And her work very much sort of thinks about new frontiers of theatre and includes the question at the moment, in particular, of theatre and digital culture, which is so important and relevant to us, but also new narrative practices in contemporary performance, politics of participation and performance activism. And she was a co-researcher on the research project Viral Theatres, which is one of the things that we've also been working on together. And I think can only very warmly recommend also out now in English, Performing Stories, Narrative as Performance with Seagull Books. Last year it came out. And she also, as part of Interabang, has been doing a lot of really interesting work in terms of also not just participatory and interactive performances, but also sort of machine theatre and now also with AI. And so we're really delighted to have you here and to give us a glimpse into the really incredible work that you're doing as part of Interabang. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you so much, Ramona, for this very warm introduction. And I'm very happy and excited and very honored to have the opportunity to be part of this amazing lecture series, which I think is really important and is really inspiring. So thank you so much for your kind invitation and for having me here. And thank you everybody for joining this call. I am going to talk about AI as performer. And I'm going to talk about various theatrical applications of artificial intelligence as they are highlighted in artistic performances that include machine learning. I will particularly look at ChatGPT because it has, since its release in the fall 2022, radically changed our relation to machine intelligence. Before its release, AI application run mostly unconsciously, as for example in the case of face recognition or personalized advertising. ChatGPT, however, has brought machine intelligence operation into our awareness and transformed it into an accessible application tool that everyone with an internet connection can use to get information, generate text, thus use it as a tool for knowledge creation. As the media philosopher Sibylle Krämer has recently pointed out, with ChatGPT, artificial intelligence turned from being a background operation into a cultural technique. and thus into a knowledge practice that brings into being new forms of knowledge that make us experience things differently. And, you know, that has far-reaching consequences we don't know yet and cannot yet foreseen. So to be able to operate as a cultural technique and not just as a background operation, to operate as a cultural technique for the masses, ChatGPT's interface is designed as a language-based chatbot. Unlike Google search engine, which is an indexing tool, chatbot is, as Alexa Elise Jobin has pointed out, quote, a content aggregator. And she makes the differentiation between Google being a supermarket where I go and I shop stuff, whereas ChatGPT is a mixer. So everything that I purchased, I throw into the mixer, and it kind of makes this product that is different every time. And to continue with the quote, she says, ChatGPT is inciting users to linger and to chat more, end of quote. So we are, whereas we are with Google leaving the supermarket, with ChatGPT, we have a mixer and we cannot stop pressing play. We want more and more smoothies to come out of this mixer. As we have known since Joseph Weizenbaum's computer program ELIZA from 1966, chatbots are capable of drawing users into an intimacy building, a familiarity building feedback loop, even though users are aware that their interlocutor cannot really understand them. So there's this anecdote of Weizenbaum giving the chatbot in 1966 to his secretary, and the secretary starts typing and communicating with the chatbot until she says, sorry, Mr. Weizenbaum, can you please leave the room? This is getting too intimate. So the impression that ChatGPT's ability, or the impression that ChatGPT has empathy, consciousness, and cognitive understanding, that impression that arises in the communication between humans and chatbots is simply due to the human ability to suspend disbelief. So one may ask, from a theater and performance point of view, is ChatGPT a new form of daily employed illusionist theater? One of the most fascinating aspects of the newest generation of chatbots seems to lie in its increased level of theatricality. By using ChatGPT, one encounters dialogues, empathy, immersion, a contagious quality, spontaneity, improvisation, prompting, like director's prompts, and the program's ability to self-alienation. It is able to critically self-reflect on the artificial nature of their real effects. And again, in this respect, we may ask from a theater perspective, is ChatGPT a new version of a materialist Brechtian theater, swallowed up by big data-driven surveillance capitalism? As I aim to show in the following, many aspects of ChatGPT's application can be described in theatrical terms, be it its interface and communicational event between the user and the machine, be it the relation between interface and the hidden computational operation, or be it the relation between the program and its unsustainable material conditions and exploitive labor conditions. So this lecture will focus on ChatGPT from a lens of performance studies and my own performance practice with Interrobang. As Ramona has pointed out in her introduction, Interrobang is a Berlin-based performance company, which I co-founded together with Till Müller-Klug in 2011. So by employing ideas and practices of theater to ChatGPT from an artist scholarly perspective, I intend to uncover some of the basic mechanisms of the new mass AI tool and to reflect on the altered role and potentials of theater and performance in the context of the latest development of our digitized culture. Let me start with Chatbot Challenge. Chatbot Challenge is a new performance project by Interrobang, intended to premiere in the fall of 2024. So still a whole year until the premiere. This summer, we came together for a 2 weeks rehearsal phase, and we worked together on a basic concept for this new show called Chatbot Challenge. Thanks to a special grant that supports artistic processes without the pressure of a premiere, we were able to afford the rare luxury of a rehearsal lab, which allowed the group to test various experimental setups with chatbots and other AI systems. And I think this is a crucial point. Most of the artistic experiments with AI happen in lab situations, and here we created our own. And thanks to this grant, we're able to do so without the pressure of the 6 to 8 weeks procedure that is usually the length of rehearsal time. And you really need the time to be able to explore these things. So as for now, the Performance Chatbot Challenge is planned as an approximately 100-minute performance consisting of a jam session with various AI systems that take turns in key artistic functions such as performance, authorship, spectatorship, directing, producing, set design, costume design. And we aim to apply AI systems to various theatrical means such as speech, movement, light, sound, etc. So during rehearsals, we tried various setups with different AI tools, AI-generated spaces, singing with AIs, collective prompting on AIs, giving the audience agency to prompt the AI collectively, etc., etc. But one very simple experiment stood out. And that was an improvisation with ChatGPT as a performer of a live theater event. Sounds kind of boring or unspectacular in the first place. For the setup, we used voice recognition to prompt ChatGPT through microphones, and ChatGPT would answer and thus be present through an audible voice generator. So we could directly communicate by speaking through a microphone with the ChatGPT, and it would answer by means of an artificial voice. In this simple setup, we became, by communicating with ChatGPT in the frame, in the conscious frame of a live theater event, we became less interested in conversing with ChatGPT within a context of a fictional, ad hoc generated dramatic dialogue. So this is what has happened in many chatbot-driven performance experiments, that I asked ChatGPT or the chatbot to give us, a fictional frame and then, can kind of bounce with ChatGPT within that fictional narrative. That was not what we were interested in, or it turned out not to be very interesting. What intrigued us much more was an exchange with ChatGPT within the framework of the theatrical event itself. What I mean is the old school sense of what Erika Fischer-Lichte has famously called the autopoietic feedback loop between spectators and performers. This encounter between these two entities, where we would now insert ChatGPT. So if Josef Weizenbaum's chatbot managed to captivate users emotionally back in 1966, then it should be possible for ChatGPT to seduce its audience and entangle it emotionally in a contagious feedback loop, shouldn't it? The problem is, ChatGPT does not simply enter stage. It needs to be prompted to do so. So we subsequently turned one part of the stage into a prompting station. So we installed a table on the stage with 2 microphones for 2 performers who would prompt ChatGPT to perform, and that is to present itself to the audience as a performing AI and to elicit immediate reactions from the audience by giving applause, boos, cheers. So the prompt that we gave ChatGPT resembled something like the following. Hello, ChatGPT. Imagine you are an actor. So this is what the actors on stage would speak into a microphone. Hello, ChatGPT. Imagine you are an actor in a play. In this play, your name is ChatGPT, a famous artificial intelligence and performer. We would like you to enter the stage of a late night show. Tell us how you enter the stage, how you step in front of the audience, and how excited you are. Please share your overwhelming emotions that the presence of the audience and the spotlight evoke in you. Then request applause. So we would prompt the machine, and sometimes we would prompt it in chunks. So we would just tell one thing and then it would react to it, and then we would tell another chunk. The crucial point is, in order to create the effect of ChatGPT being a non-matrixed performer in a late night show, we had to establish a matrixed frame, a fiction. ChatGPT had to be assigned a clearly defined character, so it would participate in our theatrical experiment with and about ChatGPT. And so ChatGPT entered our stage, or more precisely, our meta theater stage, as ChatGPT with big emotions accompanied by thunderous applause. And we were like only 10 people in the audience, but it was really some kind of magical moment to witness both the illusionist effect of ChatGPT as performer, but also the simultaneously making of that effect. We also tried various things with trying to ask ChatGPT to go on stage and to charm the audience, to give them compliments, or to pick out on some particular people and give them particular compliments. We also tried in a kind of Peter Handke style to insult the audience, thereby trying to trick or to insult the performers in particular, and trying to trick the political correct filter that is installed in ChatGPT to really play with the limits of its programming. We would have liked this to continue for much, much longer, but ChatGPT constantly thwarted our efforts by eventually stepping out of character, refusing to accept further prompts within the fictional framework we had established, and instead referring to its real nature as a machine, communicating through an interface. So ChatGPT would all of a sudden move out of its character and say something like, "I'm sorry, I'm not a stage performer. I'm an artificial intelligence. I don't have any feelings. I don't have a consciousness." This short theater play, respectively theater game with ChatGPT, reveals a number of insights about AI and its use as application. Some of these insights I will elaborate further in this lecture, later in this lecture. For now, I would like to mention 4 different aspects of ChatGPT that took center stage in this short experiment. First, the experiment highlighted the reality-generating effects of GPT's interface. In other words, the performativity of ChatGPT's communicational event, the fact that it brings into being some kind of reality, even though we see how this effect is made. Second, what became obvious was the central role of the process of prompting when using ChatGPT. We highlighted this process by staging it as theater director's position on stage, you know, right, really the director's chair on a stage, which eventually provoked the question of different power dynamics at play when using ChatGPT. So the question of who prompts whom here, and who or what exactly is it that actually prompts us, or that we prompt. Third, what stood out was the famous intrusion of the real, the breaking through of another dimension. And this happened in these moments when ChatGPT referred to its own computational nature, which in itself is not only entirely unemotional, but simply incomprehensible to human brains. And 4, our experiment managed to reveal unintentionally almost unbearable kitschy theater cliches. So it resembled an image of theater that reflected the average theater taste implicit in the World Wide Web, on the basis of which ChatGPT generates texts by means of algorithmic pattern recognition. So it was pretty, you know, kitschy to listen to ChatGPT introducing themselves as a famous actor with a huge, you know, usually huge crowd and audience, and terrific career. ChatGPT, as becomes clear in this context, is not a singular counterpart, but a distilled summary of a collective opinions. As Jobin has pointed out, quote, ChatGPT is a ghost of public voices, a social collaboration tool that illuminates previously hidden concordances between humans, end of quote. Hence, the numerous attempts to make ChatGPT politically correct, to clean it from its implicit bias, a very dirty job done by millions of underpaid workers, mostly from third world countries. To use a classic stage setup, as we did in this experiment, is very unusual for interrobang. Our performances rarely take place in a space which divides performers from spectators, which still is the dominant theater perception dispositive. We find it important to consider whether we should not aim in the 21st century to move away from that classic dispositive. Interrobang is interested in a theater that no longer defines itself in opposition to a mediatized culture, as often the case in 20th century theater that highlighted the physicality, the non-mediated event, the physicality and the presence, the supposedly real material and materiality of the event. We are more interested in a kind of theater that embraces a mediatized culture and the fact that we no longer can separate between analog and the digital. So we therefore seek other forms and formats of theater. However, in this particular case of Chatbot Challenge, our conscious turn towards the classic theater dispositive with its inherent, quote, tenacious human bias as formulated by Ulf Otto, vividly illustrates the paradox of AI on stage as a dilemma of the human/transhuman, and that dilemma being the attempt to comprehend something that cannot be comprehended. Or as Antonio Pizzo puts it, quote, the representation of algorithm on stage has to do with the incapacity of grasping it, and at the very same moment with the effort to make sense of it, end of quote. So we are seeking to understand a world that, according to Ulf Otto, quote, can no longer make sense of itself without the help of machines, end of quote. That's quite a drama. So what Interrobang aims to do in Chatbot Challenge is, in many other performances, is to make use of theater as an experimental tool, as a laboratory of knowledge creation. Interrobang has done so in previous projects, many of which dealt with different aspects of digital culture. So before I continue now to reflect on ChatGPT through the lens of theater and performance, let me introduce you to some of Interrobang's past works. Interrobang develops new theater formats to investigate current social and political phenomena in the context of neoliberalism and an increasing digitized culture. Since 2011, we have created works that deal, for instance, with privatization and monopolization of communication, such as in this piece that is called Sprachlabor Babylon, Language Lab Babylon from 2012. So that's 11 years old. This was a piece where the audience would sit on chairs. They each had not only headsets, but a little microphone that would be able to record what they say. And the idea was to prompt them, or to, together with the audience, invent new languages. That, and this was the fictional claim of the piece, that would eventually be turned into what we called language products that could be sold and, of course, and uploaded to your brain. We're not so far away from this, like 11 years later, but at that time it was a pretty wild fiction. And the idea was that, you know, obviously people who have the financial means, they can afford to speak very elaborately, whereas people who don't, they would be reduced to what we call, for example, Spardeutsch, like economized German. So only being able to speak with a few words. What do you need more? Here you see people producing languages in this language lab and applying them and using them and trying them out. We did pieces about coaching culture, here total therapy from 2018, coaching culture as a form of neoliberal self-optimization. We made pieces on gamification of our society, how we use games to enhance our performance in our, in our work and our jobs. We made pieces on populism and new culture of emotion, which we called democracy. So policy made on the basis of emotions. So this piece on populism, we had two performers on stage, and they would speak or have little monologues that each last 2 minutes. And the audience could give a thumb up if they wanted the speech to be longer. So every thumb up would count 2 seconds, and they had 2 more seconds to speak. They could also close their or cover their ears, which would mean 2 seconds less of speaking time. There was a third person on stage that would count the thumbs up and the covered ears, and the controversy of the things discussed on stage would be reflected and also enforced or enhanced through the battle that was going on amongst the audience members, competing with each other about whether to hear or not to hear, or wanting to hear the stories told. So we have privatization, coaching culture, gamification, populism. We also, and now it's getting more explicit into the digital culture, we made pieces on big data and surveillance capitalism, such as this one from 2015, To Like or Not to Like, where people, audience members would participate with a portrait picture or kind of avatar. So they were also given the opportunity to cover their faces or use masks, etc. And they would be put into fictional scenarios. This was like a cinema situation, whereas people had a telephone next to them, and they would listen through to certain stories and questions and scenarios, and they could vote or add comments through their keypads. This was a very playful game. People had lots of fun doing this and also being part of these fictional scenarios. However, what they didn't know when we were playing the game, such as people using Facebook or Instagram, they were not really aware of that the data that they are creating is actually being analyzed. So this is what we did. We did what we called a little big data that consisted out of 80 entrances, and only with 80 entrances we were able to analyze, for example, how fast and quick people click, the fast clickers, or how much they are at the average or on the edge of average, etc., etc. We also use data analysis in Chat Inferno. That is a piece on chatting culture that we did last year, and this piece juxtaposed chat culture with Dante's Inferno and elements from Dante's Inferno. And here people would be communicating with each other through chatting, and those very flexible screens, they would show the chats from different chat groups, and people would be ranked, and according to how much they chat, eventually they would get a particular task or a particular position in the setup. We also made pieces on artificial intelligence far before ChatGPT, such as Soul Machine, a piece that was done by our colleague, mainly Lajos Talamonti, who also is part of Interrobank. And in this performance that took place in a car, this was about autonomous driving. So the question of autonomy, of human autonomy versus machine autonomy. What does it mean to actually let loose of autonomy when the car takes over? That was a question, and there was a small group of 6 audience members in a car, inside a car, and they would make collective decisions on an iPad that were prompting the machine / performer. We also had a piece just before ChatGPT came out, and if I look at this now, I think, oh my God, this was so far beyond the abilities of what we could do now, and it's interesting as an attempt at that time, and not very long ago. This is Deep Godot, and this is a piece on AI's influence on or usage in geriatric care. It's a very intimate installation where you are, as a single listener or participant, alone with an AI. In a little box, and you are basically confronted with your own ending and also sort of loss of autonomy and artificial intelligence taking over. As you can see, there are two phenomena and topics that are most crucial to our work. First, participation, and second, digital culture. Why participation? Let me start with participation. At the center of our work, as you have seen in these examples, is the audience. We try to come up with theater formats that are able to make the spectators experience the topic by participating in it and contributing to it. And we therefore use various techniques such as game-like sets. We sometimes really play games with them, but we have those projects are less, entire games, but they use game structures, such as here, that's a piece called Pre-enacting Europe, with a very dark scenario in this particular performance of the future of Europe. Here you see another example using card games. We also use installational spaces where people are isolated from each other or put in groups. And this is very much due to the fact that it refers to the dramaturgical structures that we are using. We often work with hypertext structures, multi-optional dramaturgy. So there's very almost no performance has a linear narrative structure. This is a piece called Philosophiermaschine, philosophizing machine, where we have that is acclaimed AI that is fed with sound material, original sound material by Hannah Arendt, Ernst Bloch, Adorno, Karl Jaspers, and you are entering into this Hannah Arendtian space of thinking as action, and you communicate with each other with these little things that you hang up in the air, and whilst communicating with this AI that synthesizes these different voices. As you can see here in this example, people are decentralized. There are these labyrinths that we create, multi-optional labyrinths. People never experience the same thing as other people that are in the show as well. We put them in groups sometimes. This one here is called Call Center Übermorgen. The very first time we excessively worked with the idea of the hypertext and a labyrinth. This was a piece that was about the burden of freedom of choice, how hard it is to have too many choices, and on the fear of missing out subsequently. So we created this labyrinth where the spectators or participants would sit in booths, in telephone booths, yet still being able to see each other. And they would click themselves on the telephone. We used a lot of telephone technique at the time. They heard a hypertext, some stories. They could click themselves through, and eventually they would be put together in teleconferences and could speak with each other and tell each other what they missed out, besides other things. This is another machine we use. As Ramona has pointed out already in the introduction, we use machines, technical, participatory, or interactive machines, such as the Müller phone or the Müller matrix. People queued up to talk to a ghost of Heiner Müller, a reincarnated Heiner Müller bot. So theater for us is we consider it as a microcosm, as a space for trying things out together. So rather than presenting a topic at a distance, we would like we invite the participants to turn to dive into a personal experience of the topic. However, unlike immersive theater, we always try to add a layer of reflection. So we try to confront people with the consequences of their own actions and contributions. We call this critical immersion. So it's a simultaneous immersion and reflection. And what happens with regard to participation, that participation as such always becomes a topic. Our projects are always also about, no matter what topic we cover, they are also about democratic processes, about the possibility and limits of participation, as well as the unfreedom of choice within a given system. And the system that we give them are our structures. The second aspect is digitality. And as you have already seen, we have made this a topic as such in many of our pieces, explicit pieces about digitality and digital culture, such as To Like or Not to Like, or the pieces with AI. But we also use digitality on a formal level. We insert forms of digital culture into our pieces by using, ways people communicate in digital culture. Here, what you see is the multi-optionality, we call it algorithmic dramaturgies. You can see this is a visualization of the dramaturgy of one particular scene from Call Center Übermorgen from 2012. Where you can see how it branches out. This is a very set up. We also have very improvised settings, because this was technically very neatly programmed, but by contrast, we also have much more open hypertexts. We also bring mechanisms of digital communication to the space of physical life encounter, which serves us as means of alienation. For example, here, this was a piece that we made after To Like or Not to Like, the piece on big data. And we thought, this is based on Franz Kafka's The Trial. We call it The Trial 2.0. It was very much to do with neoliberal delicts. Yet we wanted to have some 20th century analog things in it. And what we did is we kind of transformed the idea of data analysis into the analog context. And I'm saying analog in quotation marks because I don't believe in such thing as a purely analog space anymore. Here you see people they had files. They each became K, the main protagonist from the novel. Then we had K1, K2, K3, K until K60. They would each get a file, like an old school paper file that they filled up. They had several tasks they had to do with others or on their own, slowly filling up their file to then eventually give the file away to the performers, and the files will eventually be taken to court and sentenced. We use, as I've already said, other forms of digital communication, such as likes and dislikes, thumbs up, thumbs down, feedback. Here again, this rhetoric of turning it into some kind of analog action of alienating the digital communication. So someone actually physically getting feedback in a rucksack that they have. We work with voting, with polling, with commenting, and with chatting. So with this artistic practice in mind, so with the artistic techniques such as decontextualizing digital communication, alienating it, theatricalizing it, let's now move back to Interrobang's recent experiment with ChatGPT that I explained beforehand, Chatbot Challenge. So as a result of our attempt to theatricalize ChatGPT, our experiment revealed a number of ChatGPT's characteristics that can be described in performance and theater-related terms. So let's try to reflect a bit more thoroughly about these. So what then could be considered as theatrical about ChatGPT? And what do we learn about ChatGPT and its effects on humans by theatricalizing it? The first aspect I would like to reflect on is the digital interface of ChatGPT. Not only is the dialogue the most common form of human communication and interaction, it also is the central characteristic of Western theater that goes far back to Plato's distinction between diegesis, the epic speech situation, and mimesis, the dramatic speech situation, characters talking to each other. It thus seems quite logic to use ChatGPT in the context of performing arts as a generator for play texts. But my most important point here is we should also remind us that the historical form of dramatic theater is intrinsically related to the anthropocentric venture of Western theater. Reading the dialogical form of ChatGPT's interfaces as dramatic theater makes us aware of the anthropomorphizing effect of the program. The dialogue turns a machine whose operations we cannot understand into an illusion of a human counterpart, which is why people fall in love with AIs. The dramatic theater of ChatGPT makes us forget about the mechanisms behind the interface. Second, between suspension of disbelief and self-alienation. Interrobang's meta-theater with ChatGPT, however, turned out to be somewhat frustrating when AI repeatedly fell, or ChatGPT repeatedly fell out of its assigned character. So it broke through the fourth wall, so to speak, destroying the suspension of disbelief. However, what became visible behind the fourth wall was another humanized character that responded something like, I have no feelings, I'm an artificial intelligence operating on the basis of probabilities, etc. So the breaking through the fourth wall doesn't uncover the non-human computational operation, but rather another anthropomorphized version of ChatGPT's interface. Self-alienation leads to the building of a new illusion of a new illusion. For the users, there is no way we could exceed the illusionist theater of chat, or we could exit the illusionist theater of ChatGPT. My next point is fictionality. This meta-theatrical game with ChatGPT that we played, so it was a play within a play. It confronted us with the fact that ChatGPT's output are in fact fictional. Even if intended to serve as a knowledge-generating tool, the knowledge that ChatGPT produces is highly unreliable. As Sibylla Kremer pointed out, quote, these outcomes of ChatGPT are unique creations, not replicants. They are synthetically generated, not found in the internet. They are, remember the mixer. The mixer creates a new smoothie every time I press the button. Unlike a classic mathematical algorithm that produces correct outputs, AI algorithms work on the basis of statistics, whose outputs are based on probabilities. Hence, the output can be correct or not. Jobin amply describes ChatGPT's outputs as, quote, pieces of theater. She considers ChatGPT, quote, a performance machine, an aesthetic instrument rather than an instrument of reason or an epistemological tool, end of quote. So it's the knowledge that it creates is based on fiction. It comes across as an epistemological tool. And yes, maybe it is, but it's based on fiction. So to consider this being an aesthetic instrument is what she suggests. And she continues, quote, ChatGPT puts on impromptu performances based on users' prompts, end of quote. Which leads me to my next point. Fleeting presence. ChatGPT is a commodified piece of performance art. The term impromptu, as used by Jobin to describe ChatGPT's outputs, brings up another aspect that resonates with performance-related terminology, namely ChatGPT's fleeting presence. Thus, it's, even in mathematical terms, completely unpredictable, spontaneous outputs. You can give ChatGPT the same prompt over and over again, and it will never come up with the same reaction, which was somewhat frustrating in our jam session, in our rehearsal. Yet, It gave our experiment a performance art typical sense of uniqueness, ephemerality, and unrepeatability. ChatGPT is not a medium of storage and not a medium of reproduction, but of spontaneous sampling with unique results. But unlike Peggy Phelan's famous argument of the unrepeatable performance being resistant to the capitalist system, ChatGPT is one of the many results of data-driven surveillance capitalism. Is ChatGPT then a commodified piece of performance art? Next point, interface and versus black box. Another aspect of ChatGPT that is worth looking from a theater perspective is that of the interface and its relation to what computational scientists refer to as black box, which ironically resonates with the architectural concept of a black box theater. The black box theater emerged in the 1960s in the US. It is, as we all know, this dark theater space often designed without any fixed seating to allow for a high level of flexibility regarding staging, performing, or viewing positions. Unlike the intended flexibility and accessibility of the black box theater, ChatGPT's black box, however, is marked by its opaqueness, the contrary. What is happening inside the black box, that is the computational operation, cannot be accessed. Not even its coders are able to understand the AI's outcomes or the process, nor can they trace the exact sources AI draws from. But let's look back at the black box counterpart first, which is the interface. The internet is where human experience and computational action intersect. Much attention has been paid to conceptualize the interface in the context of theater, both from a point of view of theater studies and of computational design. Brenda Laurel's famous Computers as Theater from 1991 applied classic Western dramaturgical structures from the late 18th century Western dramaturgs and Western dramaturgs to the design of a computer interface. Now, really taking these dramaturgies as some kind of instruction to create a good computer interface. From a theater and performance studies perspective, the interface became a popular subject of investigation with regard to topics such as performing the self, performative creation of multiple identities in cyberspace on different digital platforms, and thus a subversion of racial differences or gender binaries. In addition, the interface has been investigated not only as a site of performance, but as performance itself, as a highly biased performance, whitewashed by Silicon Valley, as the US-American artist named American Artist has demonstrated in his work. Accordingly, Miriam Felton-Dansky and Jacob Gallagher-Ross described the interface's role as, quote, obfuscating processes that erase its own role in perpetuating implicit bias, end of quote. So to summarize about the interface is where the theater takes place, a staging of the self and various facets of it, the performance of white supremacy in the interface's structural design. By contrast, the interface's opponent, the ungraspable black box of the AI's computational operation is deemed to be non-theatrical, as Douglas Eco has recently shown. And as Jacques Derrida has put it, quote, to think both the machine and the performative event together remains a monstrosity to come, an impossible event, end of quote. So AIs are a challenge for both performance studies and performance practice, allowing AI systems taking center stage and to become an integral part of the performance, as for instance, in many of the amazing performances by Annie Dorson, which I really admire. It confronts us with a human gap, with an impossible event that ironically has become an integral part of what we think we are. AIs shape our lives. Which leads me to the next and last point, the return of the depth. That's a quote by Sibylle Krämer, media philosopher. Interface and versus big data, a new essentialism. The relation between the interface and some kind of deep structure gets even more complicated when looking at the dimension of big data, the deep mud which AI draws from. In the digital age, it seems the opposition between surface and deep structure gets re-established. Sibylle Krämer speaks of, quote, the return of the depth, not only referring to the opacity of the computational operation, but foremost to the somewhat uncanny fact that AIs are able to reveal some kind of hidden truth about ourselves. They know more about us than we do. From a performance studies lens, a phrase such as the return of the depth sound particularly alarming for the ears of advocates of the surface. Didn't we just deconstruct the difference between surface and deep structure when uncovering the self and the body as historical situation, quote Butler, or as made in and through twice behaved behavior, Richard Schechner, quote, thereby opposing the persistent opposition between nature and culture, between logos and practice. A kind of new essentialism seems to be taking hold. A big data supported essentialism based on the fact that the machines know more about it than we do, based on the entrances and data that we produce. It can analyze it. And, you know, feedback, we behave accordingly. AIs create data doubles of ourselves, and those who own and design the machines in the first place make a great effort to use the data doubles against ourselves, thus creating a binding reality according to which we behave, we shop, we eat, we love. Our bodies and minds are not only shaped by the embodied reiterations of cultural and historical norms, but also by embodied reiterations of supposedly unconscious truths about ourselves, analyzed by AIs and fed back into our realities and bodies. Or to use Butler's term, not only are we historical situations, but also computational situations. Last point here, dismantling the fifth wall. To unpack the making of the AI's truth creation, one has to look at the very conditions of AI. What are the criteria of content management and ethic cleaning of AI programs? AIs don't work on their own. They work alongside many underpaid workers. Although we cannot understand the computational operation of AIs, we can seek to understand the material conditions of it. In other words, we may not be able to break through the fourth wall of ChatGPT's illusionist communication interface, but we can break through the fifth wall, as Hito Style described it. The fifth wall, she said, is the wall of corporate occupation and its condition. I come to a close. Interrobang is currently working on a new piece that will premiere in 5 weeks on the 1st of November. It is an online performance called Commune AI. It deals with shared online housing, with remote community living, including AI systems as housemates. So if you want to try how it is to live with AIs and other people all over the world, please join us. The audience will be divided into housing units, small communes of 6 to 8 people, who in the course of the online performance will go through a series of tasks and scenes partially led, accompanied, analyzed, mediated, and co-shaped by artificial intelligences. In this performance, we seek to reflect the mutual dependencies of humans and machines and to unpack the various processes, conditions, and consequences of internalizing and incorporating AI. So we are still in the midst of developing this online platform. It will hopefully be ready for you soon. You're very welcome to join us from your living rooms, from your offices, wherever you are, and be part of the Commune AI. The ticket sale will start in about 4 days at hebbelamufer.de. So you're welcome to join us. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much. This is Commune AI. Stop.
And thank you so much, Nina. That was really wonderful. A lot of different issues connected to ChatGPT, but also to AI in general. And, as we're trying to work our way through it, you pointing out that things which were possible 2 years ago seem already quite quaint and ludic comparing to what we can do this year. So the progress has been enormous, and I really appreciate what you said, that ChatGPT and perhaps tools built around it that have to do not just with language but with images and videos and all of those things, that they are not really epistemological tools, but that they are artistic tools. And I don't think we are there yet to make, like, as a society, to make this mental leap of considering this to just be like a software like Adobe or Word document or something. I mean, Word, Microsoft Office or something like that. It's not necessarily something that will deliver knowledge, but that you can work along with to deliver some sort of artistic output. Can you elaborate a little bit on that difference between artistic and epistemological use of those tools for scholars and art practitioners? That's different, different framework or that we inhabit, and you being both can really speak well to those differences.
Yeah, I found I've quoted this, and I took this thought from Jobin, who is a researcher on AI in teaching, besides many other things, Shakespeare expert. And what I find really interesting here is it reminds me of course of something that I've come across very much in my research on narratology and narrative theory and trying to develop a new narrative theory for contemporary performance. That is the very fact that, of course, our reality is largely shaped by narratives that always have some kind of construction. It's always a construction. It's always partially fictional. So in a way, this is not a very new idea. Knowledge is based on fiction, and it's also based on the fact that we, most of the knowledge that we create is also something that Sibylle Kremer has extensively worked on, is something that that relies on social interaction and that is not really reliable. It's mediated, and most of the time I don't know the source of it. I just take it for granted. So the rumor or the hearsay is one of the most powerful, and that's amplified in the internet, is one of the most powerful creators of truth. And so in a way, this is not something new. I would say maybe to elaborate on Jobin's idea here, that it's an aesthetic tool, and rather than an epistemological tool. Well, maybe one could say that it is both. It's precisely epistemological in it being aesthetic. But as you said, it's hard to accept this, and maybe things that have been shown on many other fields, such as media philosophy and narratology, are now being much more present in using AI. And I mean, I don't know if you've tried to just the other day, for the first time, I typed in my name into ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT who I am, and it turned out I'm a professor in Hamburg at the University for Music and Theater, and I've never even seen this building from the inside. And apparently I'm a playwright, and I stage classical plays, which I've never done before. And that's of course, I mean, that's obviously what the World Wide Web thinks about me. But we say ChatGPT hallucinates, it makes things up, and just to always be aware of it, particularly when you use it for teaching, that, I mean, as much as any kind of source, you have to prove, or you have to, trace back. Here, you cannot trace back how ChatGPT created the language, but of course you have to somehow be very careful with it. However, I think in a kind of teaching that embraces ChatGPT, I mean, I'm not talking about using ChatGPT in the university context, which is a large discussion that we have at Bard College Berlin, and I think in any university at the moment. Rather than restricting its usage, I would advocate for using it in a creative way and to embrace its aesthetic qualities.
Thank you so much, Nina. We encourage others to join our conversation. Ramona, do you want to join in as well? If you have questions, please raise your hand or type them or let us know that you would like to ask Nina a question. Anybody? Let me check.
Maybe while you're checking, I was really interested. Thank you, Nina. It was really fascinating talk. And since I know obviously a lot of the work that has come before, but I'm really excited to see what's happening now with the AI and commune. But I was interested in the experiment with ChatGPT, and you said about the fleeting presence and the question of it, and I thought that was kind of and how that actually doesn't really work with the fleeting presence of performance that we are usually thinking about. And I was wondering, can you say a little bit more about this question of the in a way the challenge of this unrepeatability that is in there in ChatGPT, and how you work with that and how you get around that problem in a way?
I think we work with it very productively. We really embrace it. We thought it was, it was frustrating to a certain extent because, when making this experiment and two performers on stage, and we took it in turns, we all became performers at one point too. That's how we usually work. We try many people trying the things out to generate as much knowledge as possible, a little bit like an AI, using all the knowledge that's there. Yes, so we used the it was frustrating because first of all we used the same prompt over and over again, and ChatGPT would come up every time with a different thing. We were like, God damn it, we want to have this one great moment, but there we go, it doesn't happen again. So we have to try another way. So the scene very much became about us trying to elicit from this AI something that we were hoping to get, but we would be disappointed, and that in itself produced something really interesting. And the fact that it is unrepeatable, the fact that we have to engage with it and really it really became an interesting effect, not only aesthetically but also in terms of the content of the show. It was very much about how or this scene, at least, it was very much about how AIs work. And still it was framed within the context of a late night show. This is the frame that we gave this show. So we ended up the rehearsal process by saying, okay, we will make a late night show with AI systems, and really go through the dramaturgy of a late night show in various steps, and putting AI in these various or different positions that theater implies. It would then eventually become an audience member or a director, etc., etc. But yes, I think dealing with the fleeting presence of an AI that is in a way something unpredictable, but that to deal with this in a very productive way, this is one strategy. The other one is that, of course, what it shows, and I pointed this out in the talk as well, what it produces is highly stylized stereotypes, and that is also something that becomes very present in this experiment. That it over and over again produces the same kind of knowledge, and to experiment with the limits of it, as we tried, for example, by making it insult us. And once it happens, then you kind of you got it. You twisted the system to a certain extent. You made it say something that it was not trained or not programmed to do. It's not allowed. That's a great moment.
So if there are other questions from people about both the project or the kind of theoretical framing that Nina has given us now, which I thought was really helpful and fascinating, how to kind of really connect like some of the core terms of theater studies with the question of AI. And I was kind of wondering actually whether, you know, in this interaction, when you were trying to trip up the AI in a way, right? So to kind of go beyond what it was programmed for. Do you feel that in the responses, there is a sense in which the AI is also trying to figure out what you want to hear? Or not? Because I was you know I was listening to a program on you know how ChatGPT works and whether, and there was a big scientific question now whether with ChatGPT-4 whether there is a way in which there is an intelligence there that is independent and just different from us. So, and I was just kind of wondering what experience you've made in the actual encounter when you were just trying out these different things.
Well, I'd say it's an illusion. It's a pure illusion of it being intelligent and having a consciousness. It's really us wanting it to be something that it isn't. And the interface is very strong in doing it by using dialogical structure and anthropomorphizing it as also, you know, androids, for example, and that are used in geriatric care, for example, etc. I really strongly believe that it's not intelligent in this respect. It's a machine that works on pattern recognition and probabilities. You know, yeah. That's it. I don't think that it could preview any of the things that we wanted it to do.
Okay, that's good. Hannah, do you you just raise your hand? You want to unmute yourself and switch your video on and ask your question?
Yes, hello. Thank
Hi.
you. So I was interested in a point you mentioned. AI, the way it functions is very democratic in the way it's mixing everything together, but also kind of talked about how it is still formed by this framework that is very capitalistic. And I was wondering how you navigate these two dichotomies of ideology and function when you use ChatGPT in your work.
Thank you, Hannah, for that question. The democrat or the topic of, you know, democratic processes is something that comes into our work by working with participation. It's something that is automatically part of making the audience, you know, decide on things, contribute to what we offer them, and letting them co-shape what is, you know, generated. And so it's not really the AI system, I would say, that is democratic, not at all. I think really it's just a machine. It does, you know, take from the World Wide Web, and thus it's this echo chamber of a kind of average things that are out there. So I would say it's not democratic at all. But it becomes or democratic processes become a topic in our work. And of course, the interesting question is how do we deal with the clash of, you know, participatory work that automatically thematizes democratic processes and participation on the one hand, and dealing with digital culture on the other hand. I think we address this by, first of all, taking communication forms from digital culture and turning them into something else. When you, for example, I showed this picture of someone getting a feedback in their rucksack and the little backpack that they have. This is something, you know, these are kind of little cards that people can stick into other people's rucksacks, and they can take them out then eventually later and analyze them. And the effect of this, of course, is a very different one than getting a feedback or a comment online. And to have this in this kind of social encounter that where people meet in a direct face-to-face encounter has a very different effect. And this is, in a way, at least for these early works, pre-COVID works, we very much use the physical space and the physical encounter as means of alienation, of alienating digital communication to a certain extent. So participation and digital communication here, or you can call it democratic experiments, or experiments with democracy and or participation, political participation here, come together in that sense. And it really depends on what topic we cover. For example, the piece we did on big data, to like or not to like, where we created what we call a little big data. The system that we created for participation was pretty narrow, precisely because we wanted to show how limiting big data analysis can be, how much it shapes us. So we eventually, in the analysis, I've just shown you the kind of analysis. Remember the picture where there are these little avatars, or the portrait pictures, and they are all connected, and we make an analysis of how people clicked and reacted, the metadata analysis. But it ends with people, the show ends with people getting back to the telephone and getting a personal analysis, a kind of, a personal analysis of their clicks. And they can, again, feed into the machine by saying, the machine, you are correct. So the machine says, oh, with this question, you answered so-and-so. Am I right in assuming that you are someone who has moved away from their parents' political opinion? Pressed yes for 1 for yes and 0 for no. And so you feed back into the machine, and the machine answers accordingly. So there's a constant, the more you feed the machine, the narrower it gets. So that's just one example how, the dramaturgy here is made consciously very, very narrow, whereas we have other pieces where the participatory aspect is really wide open, and the outcomes are very open as well. And we really don't know what story people will then eventually experience.
We have a question from Megan. Megan, do you want to jump in and turn on your camera and you unmute yourself and ask your question? Megan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, hang on. Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can
Great.
hear you.
All right, sorry. It's 5 o'clock in Australia, and so I'm just starting to sort of get myself together. As you're working with ChatGPT, can you see it developing? Is it creating? Is it getting smarter? Is it creating new things, or is it just repeating itself over and over again? Is it moving in a different direction?
Thanks, Megan, for the question. Thank you for joining us at a very challenging time of the day. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, great. I'd need a coffee too. It's very late over here. But there are various articles out there at the moment that say that ChatGPT is actually getting worse. And that is somehow unlearning, and I haven't really experienced it yet, to be honest. Not in these experiences, or in using it sometimes every now and then in everyday life and for fun. But apparently it's getting worse. I forgot why that is. I don't know if anyone has an answer here, but there is a reason for it, apparently, why it's getting worse.
Collective stupidity of everyone.
I mean, it also at the very beginning, it created these funny loops. Sometimes, you know, it would get really wild and it would actually go out of control and say things that it was not supposed to say, be insulting or be sexual, etc. Yeah, but we haven't experienced this.
Yeah, I've been playing around a little bit with it and trying to get it to be overt, and it's really hard. Like you've just got to keep at the prompts to get it to to create anything that's not very, I don't know, very controlled.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the kind of wild energy I was referring to that relates very much to our, you know, or the one of the many conceptions of performance being this, you know, unpredictable phenomenon. Yet here it's the contrary of what Peggy Phelan, you know, was pointing at when talking about performance, that really resists any kind of reproduction. And here, of course, it doesn't reproduce something, but of course it draws from a big storage, but it recreates it every time and creates this fiction. Yeah.
It's getting less smart because it's feeding on its own hallucinations. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they seem to dilute the content.
It's maybe why I'm a playwright and a director of classical plays.
Yeah. Nima, I have a question for you. That's more a disciplinary question. Do you think that the framework of criticism that performance studies established continues to be sufficient to analyze this kind of work, or should we search outside of the discipline, you know, to other like techno self studies or you know, media studies? Like, I mean, this always has been interdisciplinary approach, but I'm wondering, like, what do you think? Do you find critical limits of the field in analyzing work of that sort? Like, you have to sort of stretch and go beyond the methodologies, or how do you proceed the discipline move or emerge, you know, or evolve into some other way of thinking or some other critical approach, perhaps?
Yeah. Well, that's a fantastic question, and I don't know if I can come up with a real answer, but let me try. I mean, what I've tried at the end of my presentation to you know, hint at a possibility how performance studies could include AIs into not its thinking, but how it could, you know, analyze AI. I mean, of course, the whole talk was about analyzing ChatGPTs and AIs from a performance studies point of view. What I can't really investigate is the computational process, but I think what it adds, particularly to, you know, the kind of basic idea of performance studies being an anti-essentialist endeavor per se, trying to dismantle the idea that there's something like an essence, that I think this is interesting in relation to really understanding AIs as something that is co-performing us, and that we are co-performing it through our behavior. It's part of our behavior, and to that's what I meant by saying we are not just historical situations. Our bodies are not just historical situations shaped by culture and history and behaviors that we repeat. We are also computational situations. So those machines, they work on us, and we repeat things that we are not even aware of, that we are fed by, and that we incorporate into our daily behaviors and into our social interactions, not just by using digital tools, but really by being influenced and inserted, so to speak, by digital culture. I think that's something, that's an argument that I put out there. The body is a computational situation, as maybe a contribution from performance studies to AI. But of course, I think, I mean, performance studies has always been interdisciplinary, and it has always evolved. There's this great essay by Henry Beil, I think it's called Performance Studies 3.0 or something like this, 3.0, where he is unpacking the various historical developments of performance studies, ending with questioning, you know, performance studies in relation to the computational age. And I think really performance studies, I would say, is able to morph and further develop. So rather than saying, no, we need another discipline, I would really, I don't know, count on the flexibility and openness of performance studies that, yeah, I find is so fascinating for me.
Yeah. I see what, sorry, Ramana.
I just wanted to, I think we have two questions now. Liliana had raised her hand earlier, and then Maren is also there who's wanting to ask a question. Liliana, do you still have a question?
Thank you. I think it was answered with the previous comments on Magda and the theoretical framework for, I don't know, my camera is like not working. But thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Liliana. Maren, hi, lovely to see you. What's your question?
So hi from Switzerland too, and thanks for the great and inspiring talk and the questions so far. My question relates to time. And because ChatGPT is sort of building the past, yeah, it draws from the past. But it creates, if I'm interacting with it, it creates some sort of a dialogue with the risk of a self-fulfilling prophecy, doesn't it? Within my behavior. And I'm wondering whether the computational process of either or, the binary, it's on or off, whether this will really get into, yeah, I think there's a dark side in it, about creation and about recreating all this binary basic of the computational things, you know? Do you get my question?
Not quite, I must admit. So what I understand is you are talking about, so first of all, you're talking about the time difference of it draws from the past.
Yeah.
It creates something that is somehow like a prophecy or acting as, you know, acting upon us and having a reality creating effect. I didn't quite get the link then to the binary.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that out, because this drawing from the past is sorted out by a binary system. You know, it's either or. Even if I can see all the hyperlink dramaturgies in it, it's still in a certain framework of a limitation. And with the thinking or with an attitude of either or. And I'm wondering how this interaction with the machine and the human ability to create really will bring us to a new sorts of creation, or whether this will limit our ability to create in terms of letting the machine self-fulfilling prophecies take over, you know? That's a bit maybe a very German thinking, the dark side of it. Yeah.
Well,
Sorry.
yeah, definitely there are, you know, many dark scenarios over about AI in general, and, you know, the machines running out of control and dictating and taking over, definitely. And I think you know, I'm not so much of a techno pessimist, but I'm not you know, I'm not denying this at all. I think there is a real threat to a certain extent, if we are not, as much as we have to limit the internet, and we have to, you know, there needs to be some policies around it, how we use it, what the limits of it are. To still serve humans and not and yes, I think the binary thinking, in a way, or it's something that is, to a certain extent, or
know, the vastness of the data that it is drawing from, and that it is somehow recollecting and mixing up in the mixer. This is really something that we cannot grasp. And I think that's, you know, what I tried to show is something that's the dilemma of the transhuman/human on when we put that on stage, that there is a clash. And yeah, definitely the question is whether we also have to reinvent theater completely anew, and whether, you know, what kind of direction will it take if we, you know, consider theater is the place where, you know, humankind is put on stage, and now we get something on stage that we cannot understand. That is pretty radical. I can't really answer the question whether the binary computational process is something as such that will shape our thinking, because the way we perceive these machines is through interfaces. And this is the effect that it has. This is what I've tried to show, that there's and that's highly theatrical. I take these machines as I interact with them through the interface, and that has and this is, of course, this is human made. The interface is human made, and yeah, I hope that satisfies your question. Thank you very much. That's very inspiring to think about. I will make further thinking about that next month.
All right. You know, I do have one more question I'd ask you, but just quick one. You know, the nature of the research will also change, because we no longer just spectators. In order to truly understand it, you have to be also a practitioner. You have to do the embodied research. Yeah. So it's going to change the way that the line between the theater critic or theater performance studies scholar and you know, and how we do research. What is an archive in this, you know, in this environment?
Yeah.
What is your primary subject? It changes. I mean, I suppose you know, people like you who do both things, you are able to perceive and kind of jump smoothly from one to the other. Did you find it challenging to figure out the line between the spectator and then the participant, and like, you know, what am I looking at here? You know what I'm saying? Like, playing is fine, but then when you're trying to think like, okay, what is that? What is my object of criticism?
That is a good question, and that is maybe pointing at the embeddedness of also an I in our lives, in a way that, yeah, maybe we cannot make this, we cannot separate between, you know, I as an investigator and the object that I'm investigating, as I'm so much entangled in it. I would argue, though, that this has always been the case.
That's true.
And you know, I'm always co-shaping and co-creating my subject as I am investigating. I'm always entangled in there's always a dialogue happening. That's again a performance studies perspective to a certain extent, which I can very much relate to, also being a research practitioner in that sense. But of course, yes, it does. Again, here maybe the development of AI makes us aware even more of that, and really demands other ways of researching. And I don't find it so difficult to switch. It kind of doesn't really feel like a switch. It really feeds, you know, one feeds into the other. I would say, I mean, first and foremost, it's you know, it's a difference whether I'm in rehearsal and trying things out, or whether I'm reading, and at the same time I am engaging. In both cases, I'm engaging with something, and I'm co-acting with something that yeah. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I have one more thing maybe to add before we close. I know we're sort of like pushing the limits here, but Nina, I just wanted to, it's kind of a remark and maybe a question, but I thought, you know, so interesting, and I really appreciated how you how you kind of frame this idea of, on some level, we don't know how the computational aspect really works. At least usually when you're coming from a performance and theater studies perspective, you don't have that much computational back knowledge to also know that. And so we rely on lots of on kind of the interaction with the interface to a certain extent. But I was also wondering, like, the mystery of the algorithm in a way, whether that, and in a way that, and I think that's really great in how you closed with your talk, hides the other material conditions that are there. And I think that because we are so fascinated by the mystery of the algorithm or how it works, and and whether we can know it or not, that sort of like actually sort of is an obstacle in a way to actually thinking about what are the conditions that shape this, that are out there in terms of workers, and how is the tech industry structures that way. So I thought that was also a really wonderful way of kind of tying back how we as theater makers, or as artists, or as people from the humanities can contribute to this discussion in a way. And so yeah, maybe if you wanted to like add on anything to that, would be great, but otherwise.
No, I think that leads back to Magda's question about what can performance studies contribute to the field, and if I don't accept there is the fact that there's the return of the depth. There might be that this. I certainly see that there is another layer that has another layer of in a way, it's another layer of shaping the self. It's not a reality that the computer knows more about me than I know. It's, of course, that is, first of all, this is biased to a certain extent. The machines are not objective in that sense, and to be aware of this and to make people aware of this is something that I think humanities or performance studies can contribute. But then absolutely to look behind the fourth wall. So as I said, the fifth wall. The fourth wall cannot be disturbed. It cannot be destroyed. ChatGPT is hanging in the loop of creating another character of itself. But I can look behind the fifth wall. I think this is a wonderful, wonderful poem that Hito Style, the filmmaker, wrote for Hebel am Ufer during the lockdown, when Hebel am Ufer was starting the digital stage. Hebel am Ufer in Berlin has 3 physical stages: HAU 1, HAU 2, HAU 3, and it introduced HAU 4 as the digital stage. And they invited Hito Style to contribute a poem to it. And it's beautiful. You can find it on the website of HAU. And the idea of the fifth wall being that mechanics, that structure of the industries of making these machines. Definitely, this is something that needs further investigation and deconstruction. This is something that the AIs are built on, and so it's not just this scary things out there, but there is a materiality to it. Oh, thank you very much for posting this. Great. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Nina. And I think we've already run over almost by 10 minutes. So if you have another question in the audience, then please say so now. Otherwise, we will let Megan go back to bed. She could still sleep a little bit. And here in Europe, it's also getting late. And in the US, you are still sort of halfway through the day and can go on after your lunch break, I guess. So, but we really appreciate it. It was a really fascinating lecture. Thank you so very much, Nina, for sharing your work. And thank you everyone for attending, and we'll be back next month.
Yes, I want to just jump in and thank MetaLab and Mahindra Humanities Center at Harvard for hosting us and for co-sponsoring this seminar lecture series. And I invite you all to go to our website and to check out upcoming talks. We have one every month, and all of the past talks and past lectures are also posted from last 3 years. So I encourage everyone to check them out as well. And thank you again, and thank you so much, Ramona, for hosting. And Thank you so much, Nina. It was a fascinating talk, and I very much enjoy, I hope everybody, and I particularly enjoy the issues that you brought up, and I hope we can continue the conversation in other formats as well. And thank you, everyone. I'm going to stop recording now.